Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, official sponsors of the Irish rugby team. Team of us. Everyone in.
Now then, lots to discuss. Very happy to say Matt Williams is with us, former Leinster, Ulster and Scotland coach. How are you, Matty?
Hey Joe, nice to talk to you, mate.
Yeah, likewise. And very happy to say we have Chris Jones as well, BBC rugby correspondent, presenter as well of the very popular 5 Live Rugby Union pod. Hi, Chris.
Hey guys, how you doing? You all right?
Yeah, we're very well. So we have lines to discuss, but we might just start with a quick look at the Irish provinces over the weekend. Matt, we talked in advance of La Rochelle 32, Leinster 23. And you were, like most people really, pretty confident Leinster would find a way to get this done. So what happened here that you weren't expecting? What took you most by surprise?
I think the completeness of the La Rochelle victory, Joe. I thought the refereeing was very poor, but you can't, even with a different referee, La Rochelle win that game. They nullified Leinster at every turn. There wasn't one area where you said Leinster had dominance, especially after the first 20 minutes when Leinster scored their try and there was a sin bin against La Rochelle. From that time on, La Rochelle were very much the dominant team. The second half, Leinster hardly got into the La Rochelle 22, except that right at the end of the game when they scored a try, they just couldn't get their hands on the ball, couldn't get territory. And when they did, La Rochelle just nullified them. Now, I'm going to say something here, and I don't want anyone to jump down my neck because I'm saying this as a praise of Ronan and La Rochelle. I mean, they're offside all day, but that's what you've got to do. They just didn't let Leinster get that third pass in. When Leinster are in attack and they get their third pass away, they really can create trouble, as we saw against Exeter. But La Rochelle just nullified them. They competed like demons at the breakdown, and Leinster couldn't get past second gear. And I do have to say there was, in both matches, some very, very poor officiating. But the best teams did win, for sure.
Mm. What jumped out to you, Chris?
Just the power of La Rochelle was frightening. I think that the dynamism of their forwards, the relentlessness of it, the physicality, I think will have, shocked not just Ireland fans, but fans in England as well. If teams like La Rochelle are going to be putting out, on one side of the scrum, Winnie Antonio, Will Skelton, Gregory Aldrit, we know he's a phenomenal player. They got clever halfbacks. Yeah, they just looked at a really complete side, and it's very rare you see Leinster shut out like that. I think Saracens maybe have done it to them once or twice over the years. That quarter-final of the tournament last year, then in Newcastle 2019, Sarries got the better of them. But more often than not, Leinster do to teams what they did to Exeter, dominate the collisions, get that quick ruck ball play with a real accuracy and a ruthlessness that they just, after that first 10, 15 minutes, they didn't have a sniff. I thought 10 minutes in, Leinster were going to blow them apart. I didn't see the La Rochelle vice-like grip of the game coming, but once they took control of it, Leinster just couldn't breathe, could they, for that whole second half? So it was an ominously imposing performance from La Rochelle.
It's really interesting you bring up that theme of the power of La Rochelle and the 2 Saracens games, because that has been, well, I suppose at the end point for Leinster over the last number of years, that issue with the power game has been discussed. And Matt, it was interesting, Stuart Lancaster, the quotes appeared today. He was talking about the expanded Pro 14 very soon, and he was saying of the Bulls and the Sharks and the Stormers and the Lions coming on board. He said, for us as a group, we need that different challenge, that heavier team to play against and to learn the lessons of the Saracens or La Rochelle in this instance, which is pretty much an admission that Leinster spend too much time in the Pro 14 bossing other sides and therefore are not practiced when it comes to dealing with being on the back foot or dealing with the challenges of those heavier teams, to use Lancaster's words.
Yeah, an interesting observation from Stuart. And to build on Chris's point, Will Skelton was at the heart of those Saracen shutouts, and I thought he was at the heart of the La Rochelle shutout. He was just so difficult to handle. Now, I've seen Will Skelton since he was a little boy playing in Sydney, and he's always been an enormous kid. Was never fit. He went to Saracens, and Saracens got him absolutely into top physical shape, and he's held that shape. He was absolutely extraordinary. I'm sure the Wallabies will be banging on Ronan's door to see if they can get him to come back at some stage, because he was fantastic, as was 34-year-old Victor Vito and 35-year-old Roman Sazi in the second row, and Aldrit was brilliant. the other part, Joe, and we did talk about this beforehand, Ohio West had only kicked 59% in the season, and in the quarterfinal against Sale, missed some relatively easy kicks. And his incredible goal-kicking performance put scoreboard pressure on Leinster. So Leinster couldn't find a spot anywhere on the field where they could avoid pressure. And I think when the ridiculous sin binning of James Lowe occurred late in the game, where the referee said, you know, you left your feet purposely over the ball when James Lowe had crawled out, his head's out one side, and a La Rochelle player is laying over his knees, and he got sin binned for it, the game was over. But despite that sin binning, it was rather a symptom of what was occurring. Leinster just could not physically get away from La Rochelle. They hunted them down on every aspect, with the ball and without the ball. And you've got to give it to Ronan and Jono Gibbs. You know, they both know Leinster pretty well, especially Jono, who's there 5 years, and Ronan's arch enemy for a decade. And they set a trap, and their players executed that trap pretty brilliantly.
Yeah, Chris, on the one hand, obviously, Irish rugby fans disappointed not to see Leinster in the final. On the other hand, we're probably pretty excited to see the O'Gara career take off. I mean, he was on BT a couple of weeks ago after the win against Gloucester, talking to your podcast colleague Ugo Magna and Martin Bayfield as well, and kind of caught the imagination the way he was talking, and we're well adversed in all that over the last couple of years. What are you making of O'Gara and the way he's going about his career? Is he catching the eye in England in the Premiership, do you suspect?
Oh, 100%. We were having a chat on 5 Live. I was speaking to Mark Chapman about this a couple of weeks ago. It's been spotted by people, I think, not just within rugby union. You know, when you've got a guy who has achieved what he has achieved as a player, and then when you see the kind of patient I say calculate is the wrong word, because I don't think you can't really map out a coaching journey that takes you to Paris and to Canterbury and then to La Rochelle. You know, he's taken opportunities that have come his way, but the key thing, he's not rushed into anything. He's not gone, right, I need to coach Munster straight away, or I need to take the Ireland job before I'm ready, or he doesn't feel he needs to go into a backroom role at one of those places. And maybe, you know, just use as another example, someone like Nick Easter, who's a really promising young coach, you know, former England number 8. He went straight into the Harlequins backroom team. It didn't work out. Then he took himself away to the Stormers, now to Newcastle. If he comes back to Harlequins, he'll be 5 times the coach. So I think that's what O'Gara clearly wants to do, doesn't he, guys? He wants to just take it slowly. So when he does get the big job, and I've never seen a guy who feels more anointed to coach his country at any sport, like with Ronan O'Gara and the Ireland national team, and whether Munster comes first or not, that's, you know, who knows how these things pan out. But he clearly doesn't want to rush into anything and take the job on before he's absolutely confident he'll make a resounding success of it. So just watching the way he's going about his coaching journey is fascinating, because it's only going one way, and it looks like it's only going to end up with the kind of the dream job for him. Yeah, it certainly feels that way. Total tangent, brief aside, as you were talking there, I just thought Martin Johnson. Does he express regret, Chris, about taking that big job too early? Oh, every time you think about Martin Johnson, you think it's such a shame that he's not involved in the sport anymore. And he's been back on BBC TV the last couple of years doing some punditry, which I think most people found it just great to see Martin Johnson, because after 2011, he went into the rugby wilderness and still doing loads of stuff with his, you know, charity and other business interests. So he's keeping busy, no doubt, but it just feels a crying shame that a guy with that rugby intellect and that experience, he just went into a job that he couldn't say no to. But in hindsight, does he wish he would have said no? Maybe in hindsight, but then at the time, do you ever turn down coaching your country? You mean, you know, you touched upon Stuart Lancaster just then. How much better an England coach would he be now after 5 years coaching a side like Leinster? You know, look at someone like Michael Checker. You know, he might think, oh, if I could do the Australia job in a few jobs' time, you never really know how things are going to pan out, do you? But I think, Johnson, he's not really expressed any desire to get back into coaching. So unless something drastically changes with him, that's the only time we'd see him as a coach, that spell with England, which didn't work out, which is such a shame. Matt, I know in the context of O'Gara, you're absolutely a proponent of him biding his time, which, to be fair, he seems to be doing. He's in no rush to get out of La Rochelle.
Well, he's done his talking for all of us. He just signed a new contract as Director of Rugby, because technically Jono Gibbs is Director of Rugby and Ronan works for Jono. Now, that doesn't seem to have been how the relationship spun out publicly anyway, and Jono's off to Claremont. But I was pretty sure that Ronan was going to stay in La Rochelle. Now, he's never told me that. You know, we've had some conversations, but he never said, I'm definitely staying, is what's going on. But you've also got to see, Ronan's a young man. He's got a young family. They're living in a beautiful part of France. They're learning another language. He's gaining great experience as a head coach. And Ronan has said to me, and he understands, he's at the beginning of his journey. And you have to pace that out as you go through. And he has only been a head coach for a brief period. He's been around the traps and done a lot of learning. And he has got an incredibly good rugby mind ticking all the time. His thinking is fantastic. He's climbing the mountain a different way. I love talking rugby with him. And he is smart, right? The guy doesn't do what he did on a rugby field and do what he's done since then without being smart. So he's re-signed there. And I had very little doubt. I would put it the other way. I would have been shocked if he'd gone back to Munster. And I'm going to say, why go back? Munster aren't in a great place right now, and it's not a coaching issue at Munster. It's a players issue. And I think Ronan O'Gara, and for the long-term good of Irish rugby, has made the exact right choice. 3 or 4 years as a head coach, and he's going to have a bad year somewhere. That just happens, and he'll have to figure his way through that. And that's important for him as well, just as learning about winning is. You've got to learn to get through those hard years, because when you get to international level, you don't come through a season with 90%, very rarely. You know, it's a tough, the international gig is a tough gig and a very different gig. So he needs to get a library of experience under his belt before he takes it. He's done exactly the right thing by signing at La Rochelle.
Matt, just a last broad point on Leinster, and I should let people know Stuart Lancaster is going to be on OTB AM tomorrow morning, so that would be really interesting chat. So this power issue has raised its head again. So that asks a question, I suppose, of management. Is there a plan B that works against this type of approach? And then secondly, I've heard quite a few different pundits over the last 24 hours, and this, I suppose, more maybe mitigates management and their game plan, or mitigates in their favour, I mean. I've heard Bernard Jackman saying that he was in the RT podcast, and Gordon Darcy here in the Irish Times. Both of them were actually wondering about the level of depth at Leinster. Do we overrate it? Do we mistake success in the Pro 14 too much for success that will translate at European level? Like, for instance, Gordon Darcy was making the point, and Bernard Jackman was making a very similar one. He said in the Irish Times, Leinster over the years, Nathan Hines, Isan Asewa, Felipe Contepomi, Rocky Elsom, Brad Thorne, all central to past success. He's talking here about, earlier in the piece, a local cohort of players sprinkled with some top international talent. He said they brought an X factor that wasn't readily available in the squad. And then later on he said typically that X factor was in the physical stakes. So he's talking about, you know, you want to neutralise a skeleton on Sunday, you bring in Hines or Thorne or these kind of guys. And Bernard Jackman, again, similar theme. He was just talking about the fact that the production line is so successful, and Leinster seem, be it budgetary or philosophical, I'm not sure why, but lately less keen to go out and sprinkle in some of that international talent that the other top sides in Europe seem to have. So it's about talent and talent depth, I guess, is to boil the question down, and then also game plan.
It's an interesting topic, Joe. I find the reaction of the Irish rugby media very, very much that, reactionary. After they beat Exeter, you know, they had them painted so high up the wall that they needed a ladder to get to them. You know, so you're never going to win Europe every year. That's why Leinster have only got 4. Your teams have got 4. You can't win it every year. They got beaten by a better side. Do they need some more power in that pack? Yes, they do. Now, we also have to say that you've got Scott Fardy, who has been a absolutely sensational worker for Leinster, coming to the end of his career. You've got Dev Toner coming to the end of his career, Roos Ruddock coming towards the end. They've got the power of your team comes from your second rowers. And James Ryan has been quiet, and they need some more power coming into that side, and they need some fresh blood for sure. You can see what a lack of power does when Maro Toje, who has been absolutely incredible for the last few years, has a quiet year, and what that does for England. You definitely need your locks to provide the power for the team, and that didn't happen on Saturday. Ruddock went off. You've got Kane Doris, who I suspected might have been a Lion before he got injured early in the year, he's not there. So, yes, they do. I don't think there's a panic stations. I think making the semi-finals of Europe is still a pretty good result, but they did get beaten on power, and it has happened a few times. On the other hand, if you spoke to the people at Exeter with a very good Exeter pack, they got outpowered, Leinster outpowered them. So there are days away from home, a long way in France. You know, it is possible that you have a bad day. I would be very surprised if Leinster start throwing the baby out with the bathwater, but I would suspect that they do need to recruit. But mate, the Irish clubs have, compared to the French clubs, there's no sugar daddy pumping millions into Leinster like La Rochelle have. Their budget is, I believe, almost 3 times or 4 times bigger than Leinster. So, you know, they have to live within their means, and COVID has meant the means for the Irish provinces is even less than it was before.
Yeah.
So there's some reality to be had there. Yeah,
no, for sure. And COVID has probably changed things. I suppose here we're talking about a sprinkling of talent, and you do wonder if Munster can go out and bring in Deolande and RG Sneeman and these kind of players. Surely Leinster have the finances somewhere. Like, a lot of their players are centrally contracted as well.
Yeah, I would suspect you're right, Joe. There, and you know, those 2 players you mentioned for Munster have not come in. Now, we know Snowden's had a very bad injury, but they haven't come in and set the world on fire either. So we have to be very careful here on how you go about it. Brad Thorne was a special player. Rocky Elsom that year was the best number 6 I've ever seen come out of Australia for 18 months. And he was not good. He was absolutely exceptional. This is we did a long-term was a long-term asset for the club. So they chose their overseas players very carefully and very thoughtfully, and they have done that for a long time. They've been very good at it. So I suspect that with the end to Scott Vardy, Dev Toner's got a year, Maurice Ruddock comes at the end, I suspect you'll see some looking at the market and seeing who wants to come north. But right now, yeah, they got done on that game. Look, as a long-term watcher of Leinster, I wouldn't say I went away from that game and I'm just distraught and I'm worried. They got beaten by a better side in the day. They need a bit of tweaking, but that's still a very good team that didn't perform on that particular day. Okay,
fair enough. Before we get into lines, and I should prepare everyone, Chris Jones has picked his lines 36. I saw a grand total of 4 Irishmen make it. I mean, we're back to the bad old days of 1997 here. All-time low here, Chris. Ulster 24, Leicester 33 at Welford Road. Ulster were 16-7 up at half-time, Chris, and then, 20 unanswered points. What was your sense of this game? Was there any great shift in what Leicester were doing, or did Ulster go into their shell somehow? What a strange second half, considering where they were.
Interesting, because I saw Jared Payne came out and said that Ulster sort of stopped playing. At half-time, I thought Ulster were going to wipe the floor of Leicester. We saw what Ulster did to Harlequins a few weeks earlier. Danny Kerr on our podcast has played against Ulster a fair bit in recent years, and he thinks they're a quality side who were kind of overdue a trophy. And this seemed a perfect opportunity, didn't it, for Ulster to bag something. Look, Leicester have got something going on there they didn't have this time a year or 2 ago. They have more of metal. They have, probably a slightly clearer game plan. They know what they're about more. They are a side who now can turn a deficit around against a good team like Ulster. But yeah, I think Ulster will see that as the one that got away, because you'd probably back them to beat a Montpellier side who looked absolutely chuffed to win at Bath. So I think if you're Ulster, you'd feel disappointed, because that was a prime opportunity for a trophy. And if they are, behind the kind of Leinster and to a lesser extent Munster in the Champions Cup stakes, then this would have been a great chance to win something.
Yeah, it would have rubber stamped all the improvement under McFarland. Matt, we spoke on Saturday, the day after the game, and you said psychological. This was nothing more than a psychological collapse, really, on Ulster's part.
Yeah, they look. I think that to give Ulster a lot of credit and Coach McFarland a lot of credit, they've come enormous distance from the time Dan McFarland walked in the door there. They've done really well. John Beattie, as the CEO, has given them stability. He's given them direction. They seem to have an alignment between the management and the coaches and the players, which hasn't been there for a long time. Certainly wasn't there when I was there. Management were going in one direction and the team and the coaches were in the other. And then since then, the coaches got in trouble. Now they seem aligned. The guys are playing for the jersey again, which I think is really important up there. that jersey means a lot to the people, and when you had people in the team that they weren't playing for the jersey, they got off track. Now they're back on track and they've done well. The difference between losing a semi and winning a trophy is not much, and usually it's between the years. Now, if you look at exactly what Chris said at half time, I thought, here we go. They've got to show up the final now. That's great for them. And they defended the lead instead of attacking it. Now, I know it's a cliche, but it's still the truth. They just stopped looking to be to be who they are and do what they do well. They run the ball very well. They attack with the kicking game very well, and they work really hard. And they stopped all of those things and just allowed Leicester to come back at them. I actually have a lot of confidence in this Ulster side. I think they'll come back very strong in the next few years. A good defeat in a semi can teach you a lot in a year or so. And I think they'll be very hurt, very disappointed. They'll be kicking themselves all summer. But I think that in the long run, they'll benefit from that. And that is, in a game like that, in a big game, you have to be mentally rock solid. And they weren't. They just lost it mentally there for a brief period. And again, I agree with Chris, since Geordie Murphy sadly left, and I'm a great admirer of Geordie Murphy, that Leicester side has changed. And they saw a weakness and they went for it, and that was the end of Ulster, unfortunately.
Yeah, OK. We'll take a short break. We're talking Lions next with Chris Jones and Matt Williams. Back in 1 second.
Wednesday Night Rugby on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, official sponsors of the Irish rugby team. Team of us, everyone in.
Wednesday Night Rugby on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, official sponsors of the Irish rugby team. Team of us, everyone in.
Now you're welcome back. We have much to discuss. Matt Williams with us still, and Chris Jones, very happy to say Chris with us, the BBC's rugby correspondent, part of the 5 Live Rugby Union pod as well. Our rugby coverage is with thanks to Vodafone, hashtag Team of Us, everyone in. We have talked defeats for Leinster and Ulster in Europe. We are turning our attention to the Lions squad announcement. Tomorrow, 12:30, the captain will be announced about 12:10, expected to be Alan Wynne-Jones. 36-man squad will be named, smallest squad since 1997. Chris, is the 36-man squad, as opposed to, say, 41 in 2017, 37 2013 wasn't huge, 37 as well, 09 not huge, 44 obviously in 05 under Woodward. Is 36 down to COVID? Is that the main impetus behind that, or was Gatland looking to shorten it a touch anyway?
I don't know whether it's to do with also the time zones, and getting someone over to South Africa is a completely different story to getting someone over to New Zealand. There's a couple of fewer games, aren't there, compared to 2017, 8-game tour rather than 10, and maybe they want to keep the bubble as small as possible, as tight as possible. So I think there are a few factors that go into it, but yeah, the shorter tour, the factors in South Africa, I think, contribute to that. But I think I've got 6 or 7 Irish in my squad, Joe. You had me down as 4. I think I've got definitely Furlong, definitely James Ryan, Tyke Byrne, definitely Conor Murray, Robbie Henshaw, Gary Ringrose, and then Cian Healy if Rory Sutherland's not fit, which looks likely. So I think I've got 7 out of 36, even if it's 1 or 2 fewer than you guys might want to expect.
No, that's okay. Sorry, apologies. I didn't know you had Ringrose in. So I
did, yeah. 1 of 4 centres with Henshaw, Don Davis and Henry Slade. So
you have Tyke Furlong in up front, you have James Ryan in, you have Tyke Byrne in, no back rower, you have Conor Murray in, you have no Johnny Sexton in, you have Henshaw and Ringrose. So I make that 6, and then Cian Healy should injury required.
Should Rory Sutherland not be? And I think if Rory Sutherland's up against it, I even heard he wasn't in the sort of wider contention. I'm not sure exactly where he's at with his injuries, 4 or 5 weeks at least from fitness. So I think Cian Healy will go. And I think Andrew Porter's going to go because he can play both sides. I think he's got a great chance. I think Sexton's a really interesting call that is kind of splitting a lot of pundits, a lot of fans. I think Ian Henderson's got a great chance because of how he performed in 2017 and his versatility. And I think the likes of Ryan and Byrne and Robbie Henshaw, Conor Murray, all absolutely nailed on. Although Ryan's form, I think people would probably want Ryan to be firing on a few more cylinders than he is at the moment. But I'm convinced he'll be picked tomorrow.
Yeah, we'd Brian O'Driscoll on last night. He said Ryan would be one of those slightly more worried than we might have thought maybe a year ago. So just for context, 97 was a bad year in terms of Irish representation. There were just 4 in 97. In 01, there were 6 Irish players picked. 2013, we had 9. 2009 obviously was the best. We had 14 and Paul O'Connell as captain. That was the bumper year. In fairness, 2017, admittedly a 41-player squad, but there were 11 picks there. So about a quarter, give or take, and about a quarter of 36 would be 9 players is where we are. So talk to us about Sexton then. You had, Bigger, Farrell, Russell as your 3 out halves. Where were you on Sexton? What were the thoughts?
It's difficult. It's just a sort of fitness and durability issue, isn't it? I think everyone, wherever your allegiances lie, are massive fans of Johnny Sexton, what he's done, the way he can still command a game even at 35. It's just the fact he's not put a run together. He's had 3 failed HIA since February, hasn't he? And I know that all of those have been sort of taken in isolation, and I know he's getting outstanding treatment and he's not going to be rushed back. And I heard Peter O'Reilly report that he's 3 weeks away. So I think he's got every chance of touring, but Bigger is nailed on. Dan Bigger is going. And I think Owen Farrell is going. And I think the irony of it is that even though there's no English representative in that coaching room tomorrow, I know the Irish don't, but I suppose they do have Rob McBride who can fight the Leinster players' corner. Even though there is no English representation, Warren Gatland has worked with a lot of these guys in 2017, and he's not just going to let Maka Vanapola, Jamie George, Toje, Elliot Daly, Jack Knoll, Courtney Lutz, all these players who played in the test team in 17, Farrell as well. I don't think he's going to just dismiss them because they've had a bad 6 months. So I think the irony of it is the man who was sort of England's nemesis for so many years when in charge of Wales might actually have the back of a few more England players than people might expect come the final selection.
Stuart Lancaster was talking about Johnny Sexton, Matt. He said, all I can report is him in training at the moment. He's flying, he's doing extras, he's in as good a shape as I've seen. It's that strange one with Sexton, isn't it? Because at the end of the Six Nations, when he had 3 back-to-back 80 minutes and was playing really well, you thought, wow, he's in. And then the injuries have happened now, which maybe puts a doubt in the mind, even if he will be past fit to go on the plane. What would you do on Sexton? And then secondly, what do you think Gatland will do?
I think let's take the second one first, Joe, if I may, because Warren has a way of attacking these problems that is quite unique and doesn't mind ruffling the feathers up. If I was at the last test in Australia in 2013 when he left Brian O'Driscoll out and basically picked a Welsh, the guts of a Welsh team. And the Wallabies completely butchered the game, but you can't take it away. They won the series. Gaddy, and I heard Gaddy say this again about the coaching panel when he announced it. He wants people he can work with. He wants people he trusts, and he'll have a game plan to beat South Africa, and he'll pick players to enact that game plan on the field. Wyn Jones will be captain. And who partners Wyn Jones in that second row is very interesting. And I would not be surprised if Toje and Ryan both miss out because they're out of form. And I think the problem Gatland has is the Saracens players, as we saw during the Six Nations, are wonderful players, but they've put their loyalty to Saracens. And you have to admire that about them. And I do admire it about them. But their form, they can't go from playing second division to beating South Africa in South Africa. That's going to be a big ask. So he's covering his bets here. If he's covering his bets, that will mean Sexton goes. But with a huge question mark on him, because he has to be sure that Owen Farrell is going to make that test side at 10. And I'm not so sure he will. Would he put Farrell at 12? He could. But Henshaw has been the best 12 in the Northern Hemisphere. So he's in this dilemma. That dilemma might come to Sexton's rescue because Finn Russell proved you can't trust him with a test match. You can't trust him with making the best decisions in a test match that will win a tight one against any of the big 3 in the South. Finn did himself a huge damage in the Six Nations with some of the things he did. The drop goal in the last minute, tripping players, and Gatland will just look at him and say, I don't trust him. He'll go, because there's politics. When you pick the Lions team, when you're there, there's a certain number have to go. And he'll go and he'll play in the seconds. But I'd say Dan Biggar's way in front of Finn Russell. And Dan Biggar may even start the test matches. So, again, it's about how Warren's going to attack the game plan that he has in place.
And do you differ from that? Do you differ from that, Matt? Because you were saying, I'll take the first part, or I'll take the second part first. I was asking what you do as well. Where are you on Sexton?
I'm hugely worried about Johnny because he's not lasting games. I think it's a big, big gamble to take Johnny on a tour. There is no doubt he would be wonderful on tour. He's a leader. He's been on so many trips. His wisdom, his knowledge, his intergenerational knowledge. He'd be and his attitude, mate. The man's ruthless. Yeah. And that's what you need. That's what you need. You know, that's what, when Brian Driscoll was a young man, went on the 2001 trip, and all of a sudden he came into contact with Martin Johnson and Neil Back and all these incredible Delalio and these guys. You know, he came back a different man because they didn't care. He scored 3 tries against France and he was a lovely bloke. They wanted a ruthless mongrel on the field who was going to win them games. And that's the way they got about it. And that was correct. Brian was a different man when he came back. Sexton is the perfect tourist you want. But you can't take Sexton if he lasts 20 minutes in each game or goes 20 minutes in a game and then you lose him from it. It's a very short tour. So he's swinging in the balance. Yeah,
I think what might go in his favour is he did last those 80 minutes in the Six Nations, and look, a head knock can happen to anyone, and he's just on a bad run at the moment. Sorry, Chris, you were coming in there.
No, it's fascinating 10, and if Sexton goes, and I think we assume Biggar goes, and I know that Owen Farrell splits opinion, especially outside England, but I'd be staggered if Gatland's not going to pick Owen Farrell, given what he did for him in 2017. That means that one of Sexton or Russell misses out. And I'm just fascinated in that selection meeting to what extent Townsend is pushing for Russell, to what extent Gatland will feel, can I go on this plane without Finn Russell? Otherwise, you're taking 3 fly halves who are all quite strategic compared to Russell offering something different. Will they, do they want Russell off the bench in the test matches, or is that pie in the sky, and they'd much rather a strategic game manager in the bigger mould to come off the bench and play Sexton or Farrell at 10? Does Farrell play 10 with a bit? Farrell play 12 with a Biggar or Sexton at 10? There are so many imponderables, but it just seems mad that Sexton could either be the starting test 10 or not even get in the 36. Yeah. And that's a massive difference between the two, because there is not enough space in a 36-man party to take 4 10s. And I think also they could take 3 and then maybe take Farrell as a 12. But I am almost convinced they're going to take Manu Tuilagi because of that power issue and with George North not being fit. And, they could play Robbie Henshaw, but they've got John Davis, who's just turned 33. Is he the player that ripped it up in 2017 and 13? So that midfield area, which I think a year ago looked so strong, there are a few question marks about it. And I wonder if that was where they spent a lot of their time in the final meeting today. Yeah, it is fascinating. Even on Townsend with Russell, I mean, you think what a rocky year they had not so long ago, and now they're back on board. I think if I'm Gregor Townsend, there's one name I'm walking out of that room with on the team sheet, so I can face him again, and it's Finn Russell's name. I'm not backing down in that. And I'm the attack coach. You got to give me the tools I need here, Warren. Like, if I'm Townsend, Chris, I'm not walking out of that room and calling Finn Russell to say I didn't get you in. I'm not doing it. But the thing is, Matt would know from all the selection meetings he's conducted. The likes of Townsend, he's got to pick his battles. He can't be fighting for Ellie Price and fighting for Finn Russell and fighting for Chris Harris in the centre, fighting for Duane van der Merwe, fighting for Johnny Gray, fighting for the props, fighting for George Turner, fighting for Hamish Watson and Jamie Ritchie and Matt Fake. He's going to have to go, right, who do I genuinely think are the 2 or 3 Scots that I'm going to put my neck on the line and say to Gatland, you don't know these guys, you've not picked them in the past, take them, they will deliver. And the Russell-Townsend relationship, I keep going round in circles with it, because on the one hand you go, oh, they've repaired it completely. Those big bridges have been rebuilt. And, Townsend has been speaking Russell up so much in public. Yeah. But on the other, you've got their history, which is water under a bridge, but you've also got, Russell being that kind of, he is his own man, isn't he? It's going to be a bubble environment. Do they want 36 guys who all toe in the line? Do they want a lot of different characters? But the moment someone isn't in the test team and is just not going along with everyone else in a 36-man bubble environment, that could be could be really interesting or even worse, damaging for the squad morale. So I think Russell is fascinating in this. But as Matt says, I'd love to see Russell playing 10 in the test matches for all the rugby romance reasons. But I just don't know if he was consistent enough in the Six Nations to say to a coach like Warren Gatland, who errs on the side of pragmatism, pick me at number 10. I think Dan Biggar almost did the exact opposite. Dan Biggar was so consistent, and Gatland knows him so well that if you'd asked me 6 months ago, Biggar's not near the test team and Russell's pole position, and now they've kind of gone in opposite directions.
Yeah, really interesting. On the Saracens lads, Chris, you'd have a good sense. I mean, we saw them pitch up at Six Nations level and, well, I mean, Billy Vunipola Shorts told their own story. That's kind of all we need to know there, you know? So they weren't at it. And the Six Nations was like, they were like using matches to try and get fitness into them. And Jones stuck with them. And that's his, you know, that's the way Jones operates with those guys. And they're his core group. So... Yeah. Have they been doing much now? Because obviously I'm not watching much of that second tier league over in the Premiership with everything going on. Like, are they getting games? Where's their fitness? Or will Gatland be looking at a group again pitching up out of the Six Nations and be having to use those games from Japan on the 26th of June right through to the Bulls on the 17th of July to try and get this Saracens cohort fit? Like, will they be turning up in bad shape again, or are they playing?
I mean, the thing is, Joe, everyone's misread the Saracens situation. You know, everyone's misread it. Eddie Jones has misread it. I think a lot of us in the media have misread it. I heard Sarim McGeechan he was on the radio end of last year going, this is perfect for Gatland. He's got 6 or 7 centrally contracted players who will just peak for the Six Nations, chill out, peak for the Lions. And for whatever reason, it's not worked, has it? You know, they were fine in the autumn, then didn't play. I think a lot's being made of their 2 months out. Players have 2 months out and come back and hit the ground running. Plenty of Irish players do it. Plenty of Leinster players do it. You know, they might not play a huge amount of Pro 14 and they often can really peak. But the problem is that the Saracens players were all together in the same boat, weren't they? So even someone like Jamie George, who is always consistent, he was not able to raise his standards. Atoje tried his best. Farrell tried his best. The good news from their point of view is they've actually been playing because Sarries got burgled by the Cornish Pirates. I think it was a few months back, just before the Six Nations. And what it meant was that now they can't take any chances. They've got to win every game to get promoted back up. Right. And then they've got a big sort of final against the Ealing Trailfinders, which will be the weekend before the Japan game. So the irony of it is that everyone's just misread the situation. They're playing far more championship rugby than we expected. They've not been peaking for internationals. And they're all, if they go on this plane, that's a leap of faith from Gatland, knowing how good they are. But I think we just need to be a bit careful about writing these guys off. I think Elliot Daly's in trouble because he's looked so out of sorts. I think Billy's in trouble because there is a player like Sam Simmons ripping up trees, who's a completely different type of athlete to Billy. But Jamie George will go, I'm sure. Farrell will go, I'm sure. Atoje will go, I'm sure. So I don't think you can write all these Sarries players off, but certainly what happened to England, what's happened to the Sarries, I think Gatland needed like a hole in the head. Yeah, very difficult to manage. Matt, last word on the lines. Any... Bolter feels like the wrong thing to say at this stage, but any Irish name might surprise us, might get included, or anything else you want to say about the situation generally, even beyond Ireland?
Yeah, Joe, I'm astounded that there is that the veracity of this tour going ahead in the COVID situation that's in South Africa has not been questioned more in the media. We've seen what's happened in India with the IPL cricket. My reports coming out of Africa through people I know is the situation with COVID there is much, much worse than the government is putting forward. I'm quite astounded that this question of the ability of the tour to A, function in a bubble, and B, to keep safe with the variant down there hasn't had much more publicity. It's, the information I'm getting out of South Africa, it is a very, very difficult situation in normal society down there. So I think there has to be some sort of questions coming from the media about what happens if, like what happened if the bubble breaks. And we just saw that in India. The bubble broke and the tournament fell apart in the last 48 hours. And they're going into a very, very difficult, different environment. The reality environment they're going into, I think, is very different to the way people are believing it is. The hospitals are full, and there is a lot of illness in the community. So I think that aspect, to me, if I was a player going on that, like Johnny Sexton with a young family, and what happens when they get home, these guys are going to have to spend a lot of time when they come home in hotels, in isolation. This is a very, very different tour. This is not going to play golf in the afternoon. You're not going off to the game parks like we did in the old days. You're not doing all the wonderful wine tours through the Constantia Valley like we used to do when we played Super Rugby and International Rugby down there. This is going to be a tough trip. And I think that backs up Chris's point. The character of the people that are selected may be just as important, or will be just as important if you listen to Ian McGeechan and Jimmy Telfer and these icons of the Lions. The character of the people they pick may be the telling factor on who goes on that trip, because this isn't going to be an easy trip.
It's a great point. Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, if 09 sort of rehabilitated the enjoyment levels of the Lions, Chris, this is going to be a tough tour for all the reasons Matt's outlined. Are you going? You're travelling down? You must be.
I'm looking to go. We're looking to go for at least the test matches. But, you know, there, as Matt's saying, there are so many things up in the air. I think quarantine coming back. What will the quarantine situation be like with South Africa on the red list and going into a government hotel for 10 days, 11 nights or whatever it is? Matt's completely right. I think the reason the media are not constantly questioning it is just because, you know, at some point you've also got a responsibility to the audience to try and get excited. And I've found throughout the COVID period as a journalist, completely compromised between, on the one hand, saying, what are we doing? You know, why is this happening? This is ridiculous. Behind closed door sport, all this stuff, it just feels so wrong. On the other hand, people want their rugby on the telly and they're so excited for the Lions, and it's a little bit of escapism to pick your Lions squads. But yeah, to think that the tour is going to go incredibly smoothly, all it takes is one COVID case in the Lions camp to throw the tour into turmoil. We saw what happened with the England cricketers. Will the players be able to get vaccinated before going? There's been no movement, certainly from the UK government, to bump pro sports people up the pecking order. And I don't think there's much of an appetite from the public at large over that, although I can't say that for sure. So yeah, there is a huge amount of uncertainty. And I suppose a bit like the Six Nations, we're hoping that there's a lot of reasons that Six Nations shouldn't have worked. The Six Nations thrives off travelling fans. It thrives off support, of the parochialism and the colour and vibrancy of the occasion. It had none of that, and it still kind of worked. So maybe that's where we're all approaching this tour a little bit with our fingers crossed behind our backs.
Okay, fellas, great chat. Chris Jones from the BBC. Great to have you on, Chris. It was really nice to get your thoughts from afar.
Good stuff.
And Matt Williams, as ever. Cheers, Matt.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Chris. Bye.
Wednesday Night Rugby on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, official sponsors of the Irish rugby team. Team of us. Everyone in.